I figured I would throw this video together because this game has, in my opinion, undeservedly acquired a negative reputation online due to several negative reviews of the game on YouTube and, of course, back in the day, magazines. So first I'm going to talk about bugs. That's probably the thing that this game is best known for. This is what the game is most infamous for. I only encountered a few bugs, really. I'm not going to downplay it. Some of them are quite serious, and in fact, these bugs will completely ruin your playthrough if you're not capable of figuring out a workaround, but I was able to do so, and I thought up most of these solutions in 2 minutes, so it's not a huge deal. You can get through the game pretty easily. The biggest bug, and this is probably the most notorious of all the bugs for this game, the level 5 save bug. On level 5, if you die and you reset DOSBox, it causes a bunch of objects to be replicated or something like that. I don't know. I'm not a coder, nor am I extremely familiar with the operations of the bug, but I know that your save file size will increase dramatically every time the DOSBox restarts. So if you die on level 5, you have to hit Control F9 to actually just completely close DOSBox, or you can reload a save immediately before you die. So that's not a huge issue. You can work around that pretty easily. I encountered some minor audio and visual bugs throughout the whole game. That's something you're going to encounter with practically every single game that exists. I mean, I can't think of any game I've ever played that didn't have some sort of minor audio or visual bugs, so it's not a huge deal. What is a huge deal, though, are enemies getting stuck within the terrain, yourself getting stuck within the terrain, and the slow and crooked movement. So first, you getting stuck in the terrain will actually completely halt your playthrough, because on level 6, you need to go inside this castle to talk to an NPC, and when you exit, you always get stuck on the drawbridge. So you're going to need to set a teleport anchor somewhere before you go in. So that's pretty easy to work around, not a huge deal. But it is something to keep in mind. If you don't have any way to teleport on level 6, your playthrough is over. So if you're going to play the game, always have 2 teleport potions for level 6, or ideally, just get the teleport spell at the start of the game. Enemies can get stuck in place pretty easily. I think it happens when you move around too much, and they can't actually track you. Like their pathfinding gets screwed up somehow, and they just, well, it's hard to describe. They're not exactly going in circles because it's not like a 3D model. They're just kind of, it's like the sprite is basically just spasming out. But yeah, that's a pretty big issue. It makes the game real easy when, I don't know what proportion, probably 1 out of 5 or so of all the enemies in the game just get stuck in place. They'll still attack you when you go up to them, but they're not going to be chasing you down. So you can just get by a lot of the enemies in the game just by causing them to spasm out in place, and then you just go around them. And then there's the slow and crooked movement. I don't know what causes this. I think it's probably got something to do with DOSBox, but the movement is really slow and crooked. I guarantee you it wasn't this way on release. I guarantee you this is something that's, a modern issue. An issue with modern hardware and DOSBox, but I don't know. Maybe this is something that happened in the original release also. Either way, that's a little bit irritating, but it's not game breaking. It's not going to prevent you from completing the game. It'll just make your movement speed a bit slower, and it makes the platforming more difficult. But you can circumvent that just by getting the levitate spell, or just through practice with the jumping and the platforming. The other thing I've seen a lot of critics criticize this game for is its difficulty. I didn't think it was very difficult, and I got through the game on a blind playthrough. I only looked up stuff for level 5 because, I didn't want to spend a whole bunch of time on that level due to the save bug I knew about. And then I looked up one thing for the first level because, I'm blind and I failed to click this switch again. But aside from that, it was a completely blind playthrough. I don't remember looking anything else up. And I got through the game perfectly fine. My build was pretty viable. And, I only had experience with Morrowind and Daggerfall prior to playing this. You could argue, my experience from Oblivion and Skyrim helped me in this game, but not really. The leveling systems in Oblivion and Skyrim, the character creation systems in those games, aren't really even remotely comparable to the complex character creation system for Daggerfall and Battlespire. Really, I only had experience with one similar game in terms of the character build systems, and I got through the game perfectly fine. Not a very difficult game at all, in my opinion. And I would argue that by level 6, if your character build is viable, the game becomes a total joke in terms of difficulty. And the game can't be too difficult anyway, because there are these healing gems on every level somewhere. Granted, you have to find them, but once you've found them, you can just go back to them over and over again and get your spell points and wounds completely restored, so the game's not too difficult. Now we're going to get into the things that I love about the game. Soundtrack, pretty good. It's not spectacular, but it's a pretty decent soundtrack. I wish there were different tracks for levels. Each level only plays one song over and over again. I wish there were 2 or 3, but it's whatever, I guess. The game looks beautiful. I think the sprite work looks great compared to modern games. A lot of modern games look terrible to me, though. That's, again, this is a subjective part of the video. You'll have to look at the sprite work for yourself and come to your own conclusions, but I think the sprite work looks great. It's a very colorful game. There's a lot of color contrast. Very nice use of color. Character creation system is fun to use. The levels are fun to explore. The various Daedra always have something interesting to say. The enemy designs look great. The texts that are in the game are pretty interesting to read, and personally, I enjoyed the combat. Overall, it's just a great game. I highly recommend it. At this point, I would say it's my favorite Elder Scrolls game, quite frankly. I didn't like Daggerfall very much. I considered doing a full-length review of Daggerfall, like a 15-minute video, but there's really not a whole lot to say. I like Daggerfall, but it's kind of repetitive. The dungeon crawling gets old after a while. The thing I really like about Daggerfall is the scale of the cities, talking to the various NPCs, but I prefer this more condensed game, this more condensed experience that you've got with in Elder Scrolls Legend, Battlespire. It's just really nice just to go through the levels and try to figure out what you're supposed to do, kill enemies, maybe read some small scroll, look at the nice environments. Now I would say you could have a lot more fun with other Elder Scrolls games, just because there's more there to experience. But I've got to say, if I could only play any Elder Scrolls game for a set amount of time, like 10 hours or so, I would definitely pick Battlespire over any other Elder Scrolls game, because those games take an extremely long amount of time to actually complete, and there's a lot of filler content in the other Elder Scrolls games. The mainline games have a lot of, in my opinion, boring, repetitive content, especially the later games, Oblivion and Skyrim. So I highly recommend in Elder Scrolls Legend, Battlespire. Like I said, it's my favorite Elder Scrolls game so far, and I've played Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion, Skyrim, and of course, now Battlespire. And I think, quite frankly, that this game will hold its position as my favorite Elder Scrolls game even after I play Redguard.